Good evening and warm welcome to all of you to the Holtzbrinck Lecture to be given by our Holtzbrinck Fellow, Özge Samanci. Welcome, Özge, and everybody. The Holtzbrinck Fellowship, which you hold, was established in 1999 with the generous support of the Verlagsgruppe Georg von Holtzbrinck. The fellowship is intended to promote German-American dialogue in the fields of journalism, nonfiction, and fiction. More than 30 nonfiction writers, journalists, and novelists so far have spent a semester at the Academy as Holtzbrinck Fellows, among them George Packer, Hilton Alls, Joan Acocella, Adam Johnson, and you. So next year you'll be on that list. And we want especially to thank a really wonderful and close friend of the Academy, Stefan von Holtzbrinck, for his personal support and the support of the Foundation in making the fellowship and, of course, this evening possible. The lecture this evening, as you know, will be given by Özge Samanci, Associate Professor in the School of Communication at Northwestern University. And she will be introduced by Daphne Dragona, who holds a PhD from the Faculty of Communication and Media Studies at the University of Athens. She is the conference curator of the Transmediale Festival and has been part of the Transmediale team since 2015. As many of you know, Transmediale, now in its 31st year, is one of Berlin's most recognized art festivals and a year-round project that draws new connections between art, culture, and technology. Transmediale 2018, with the title Face Value, will return to their home venue, the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, from end of January to the beginning of February, January 31 to February 4, 2018. So we will first welcome Daphne, who will introduce Özge. Özge will then give her presentation. We'll have ample time for questions and answers. And Özge, just at dinner, encouraged me to repeat something that I very often say, but not all the time, and that is, please ask a question that's a question, with a question mark at the end of it, so that Özge can actually take up most of the time in continuing the discussion. And then after that, we will be delighted to welcome you again next door for a reception. So thanks for being here, and Daphne.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invite. It's lovely being here and introducing Özge's work. So, Özge and I met in person this month in preparation for this evening's event. And knowing that Özge is a media artist, but also a scholar and associate professor in the School of Communication of Northwestern University, there was one central question that came to my mind, that how come, and during her residency here, in the American Academy, she decided to work on a graphic novel. How close could the graphic novel be to media theory? And how does it complement in a way, or how could it complement media art pieces and the fields of interest that an artist is exploring? Özge's interactive installation are, of course, an outcome of her artistic and research work. And they have been exhibited internationally at festivals and events such as File, SIGGRAPH, IZEA, the Raw Media Art Biennale. And her most recent works involve sensors and kinetic systems, and they address the relation of the human to the natural environment. They are works that, in a way, they comment to the impact of the anthropogenic activity on the planet, and that they remind us of certain divides, like the ones between culture and nature, between the human and the non-human. In a way, they remind us of divides that are artificial, that are constructed by us. So Özge, I think, is interested very much in kind of addressing in this kind of emerging techno-ecologies and in highlighting the material that the materiality that exists in our immaterial, let's say, communication, addressing questions about the links that we build, but also the links that we tend to forget. So, or we tend to even destroy. So having this in mind, again, how do graphic novels can connect to this discourse? How can they contribute, become part of an artistic work? And there are two elements, 2 points that I would like to mention. The one is that what I understood when I met Özge, and this was that there is no such division in a way. The same way that there should be no inseparability in how we understand us with the world, there should be no division in media. There should not be division between all kinds of media and how they're blended into each other. Özge prefers to work in a way transversally, allowing connections and encounters between media works and ideas to occur at any time. And this is how, interestingly, we see in her works that in her narratives and stories, different layers of information might involve, like they would, for instance, if we would be online, while in her installations, moments of stories, the vividness of a story can be captured, like we would hear it, like it would be told. And the second element that I would like to mention regarding why a novel, the way I understood it, is that because there is a certain power in storytelling, in reading and telling stories. And this is especially important when it comes to addressing complex issues and constructing divisions. And this is what struck me when I read the previous book of Özge, Dare to Disappoint, which is already translated in 4 languages, and which addresses the cultural, social, and political divides. Now, the book, which is autobiographical, is based on her life as a child and as a teenager who grew up in Turkey in a period of polarization and authoritarianism. So we get to learn the story of a young girl who studied maths in a patriarchal society in Istanbul before taking the decision to turn to the fields that she was really interested in. But at the same time, and while following the story, we get to think about the issues that are being tackled and reflect, and we tend to reflect upon what is happening today, and that is the global rise of nationalism and the radicalization and fanaticism in the world today. Now, in my case, and being close in age with Özge, and having grown up at the other side of the Aegean Sea in Athens, and remembering the prejudices and the fears that I grew up with, especially with reference to the relation of the two countries, Özge's story managed in a way to take me back in time and to break this cultural barrier that was there. So I would like to close here just by saying that Özge surely knows how to address and oppose divides. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about her new graphic novel, Between the Middle East and the Midwest. Thanks a lot.
I'm gonna thank you in a way, but I wanna begin with a question. What are you doing here? Pussy Riot is performing in Berlin, and you chose to be here. Thank you so much for being here, because no one can compete with Pussy Riot. Now, I want to thank a group of people, and I want to take my time for that. I would like to thank Daphne for using your creative mind to articulate my work and to celebrate it with you. I want to thank Michael Steinberg for his dedication to American Academy. His dedication is both personal and professional at the same time, and hard to imagine. And this drawing is for the trustees, because I couldn't draw them one by one. And it also includes my thanks to Whole Spring Foundation. So it's a disco fireworks. Sorry. And sorry, go back. Now I can do it. So I want to thank them for creating resources for keeping this place alive. Without their work, nothing would exist here. And I'm also thankful to trustees for being present in the life of academy. This includes Cathy Marton too. I want to thank Johanna Gallup and John Thomas Eltingham for their hard work and diligence for curating a group like you. And there is a C here, it represents the army of staff who works here, who makes our undivided attention to our research and artistic production possible. I can count their names, and thank you, all of them. I want to thank the fellows for sharing their worldview and their ideas with grace and generosity. I want to thank to Nancy, thank to Steiner, thank Dilip, Aglaya, Thomas, Sugi, Peter, Kira, and Jackie. Thank you. Yes. So here's my talk. I gave this title in August, and like in a couple of weeks before I really started preparing this talk, I said, oh, this should have been the title. And then I got even deeper into it, and I said, no, this should have been the title. And so a little bit of those, all of those today we're going to cover. So media art and graphic novel, as it appeared in Daphne's wonderful presentation too, I want to cover that because I want to show you two media art pieces that I recently completed. And we are going to read a chapter from my graphic novel. And so that I want to establish a relationship. For many people, media art and graphic novels are two distinct forms. It's hard to imagine how they get together. But if you are an interdisciplinary thinker, then you may imagine a place, they may overlap. For me, it's even more extreme. I see graphic novels as a subset of media art. And after looking at the work and talking a little bit, we're going to come back to this slide. So graphic novel is easy to understand. Many of you have seen one. There was one being sold in front of the door. But what's the media art? Its definition is a bit nebulous. It changes person to person. And so when I am talking to someone and telling them what I do, here what happens. What do you do? Media art. What's that? Art with computers. You mean animation? No, it's more like computer games. Not exactly. I build sculptures that do something when you do something. Okay. And then we move to eternal silence. But if the person is a genuine communicator, then we move to level 2, and then they say, tell me more about it. And then I go ballistic like this. Interactive art with sensors, robotics, computer vision, simulations, data visualization and sonification, low-level biomimetics, and embedded computing. And they say, you are a scientist. No, I'm not, but I create art using science and engineering. What do you do? Mathematician. In general, their answer is like more established discipline, and we can receive it. So since I'm going to show you 3 pieces today, I want to talk about the common themes that are bringing these pieces together, that are propelling these ideas for me, what I am obsessed. And so here comes our title, Humans and the Rest of the World. And so we have a nervous system. If someone slaps us on the face, we feel it. But if someone taps on the table, we don't feel it. These and many other factors, we have this tendency to think human body as a separate thing than the earth we live on and the universe that the earth is placed. So we are looking at the Big Bang expansion, 13.7 billion years, and our earth is somewhere here, I think because it's 4.5 billion years old, right? And in that time scale, in that physical space, we have our invisible tiny body, and we think we are separate from all of these. And for example, you heard the idea, we are what we eat, right? And as an extension of that thought, for example, I am 43 years old, but the atoms currently in my body, they are billions years old, right? The carbon atom on the tip of my finger was somewhere in the universe. It has been in the soil, that same carbon, it's right here right now, authentic carbon. And then it was the sea, and it was on the clouds, and it was sometime it was air, and once upon a time it was a single cell animal. It was a tail on a shiny fish on top of an ugly bug, and it flew with the bird. And right now it's here, right on top of my finger, maybe for a couple of weeks. So the atoms are cycling, turning around, and when we think, we don't think about that, but when we think about it, we think everything is coming from the Earth or around the Earth. So for 4.5 billion years, things are cycling. And but if we think, when we look at something under sunlight, how we see is a photon from the surface of the sun, makes an 8 minutes journey, comes and hits our retina, and then we absorb that photon, and it becomes us. So we are becoming sun. We are not only sun, other photons are coming from far stars, and it's like, it's not material things, but we are even taking the other parts of universe into us. And we're curious about the universe. We want to know when it began, what was it like before it started, how it's going to be like when it ends, if it ever ends, what's the dark matter, and so on. It's not the perfect analogy, but it reminds me we are looking for our glasses while they are on top of our head. So we are made of dying stars, and we are part of Earth and universe. We forget that. And this division, humans and the rest of the world, is very, very wrong. It would be illusionary boundary between humans and the rest of the world, yeah. And so, again, you might have heard this thought too, that the universe itself can be a sentient, conscious being, and we could be its blood cells, or we could be atoms of this large thing. It's such a big thought. I can only use it for speculative fabulation, because we are in the beautiful arms of arts world. We are free to do whatever we want. I'm not a scientist right this moment. I don't have to prove anything. I'm just enjoying the thought. Yeah, and like, this is just one image that I can think about by Brandeis University. So here we are seeing 3 neurons in the mind of a mouse. He's cut from the brain, and this is a simulation of the formation of the universe. So the similarity is interesting. And while we are made of dying stars, and while we are extension of the universe, we damage the planet, and we damage as much as we can while treating ourselves pretty good. And I'm not going to show, it rates damage there, it's just to remind me. Normally this slide would be a blank slide. I'm not going to show any images of how we damage the Earth, because one problem with that is we have seen them so many times. We are immune to those, and that's the difficulty of making a point in the environmental problems area, that it's so much chewed, it's so hard to say something new. So when the term Anthropocene popularized in 2000, it came like a bomb into these discussions, because it was simple, it was understandable, it was epic, and it was placing humans at the center of its discourse. So what is Anthropocene? So the geologists look at the rocks, and based on the rock formations, they can say in 4 million years, this happened, 7 million years, this happened. So these are duration of epochs, millions of years. And we are currently in the Holocene epoch, which started 12,000 years ago. And the Anthropocene people say that we are now leaving a layer on the earth with our plastic, with our nuclear experiments, with our poisonous materials, and that's going to be our geological mark on the surface of the earth. So the current 12,000 epoch, very young epoch, is over due to us, due to awful human beings. And these are the people who jumped into Anthropocene. And there are many critiques about it, which might be an environmental buzzword. And one of the wonderful critiques comes from Donna Haraway, and she comes with Holocene. Her term is never going to be as popular as Anthropocene because it's hard to pronounce it, and it's very complex, and its power lies in its complexity. And then how Donna Haraway approaching this issue is, she acknowledges that Anthropocene did created great energy to discuss these issues by bringing a new way of looking at it, but she thinks that it also created an inevitability, like unsolvability, a super pessimistic approach. And this is, to me, very beautiful. She says this discourse is placing humankind at the center of it. We came here because we think ourselves at the center. We think we are above of all the ecosystems so that we can ruin anything we want. And when we think about it, we are still placing ourselves in it. So her thinking is more based on symbiosis and flattening of any supposed interspecies hierarchy. So that she suggests at least we can try to talk about this in a more, by talking ecosystems, by not making it too narcissistic. And my work is closer to Donna Haraway's approach, and the work that we are going to look at least tries to be non-binary, intertwined, and humans are not a separate entity, humans are not at the center, and the interconnectedness is emphasized. Of course, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there, but this is where I am trying to go. And this brings us the first piece that we are going to look. So we're going to look at a 3 minutes video of an art installation, Fiberoptic Ocean, that I did, I believe, last year. And before we start, let me give you a context with 2 slides. This is the underwater fiber optic cables, and this is how our internet is possible. All these cables go underwater, right? And this piece, there are more than 300 cables currently. This piece came to my mind when I saw this shark biting down on this fiber optic cable. More of it is explained in the video. It's a very over-explained video by me, so I don't even need to say anything. Fiberoptic Ocean is a data-driven, interactive installation that composes music. This installation creates unique musical scores dependent on live data. Fiberoptic Ocean conveys the consequences of technology's invasion of oceans. I am Özge Samanci, the artist who designed Fiberoptic Ocean. There are underwater fiber optic cables crossing the oceans and connecting the continents. Sharks are drawn to these cables and are biting on them. One theory is that the magnetic field around a fiber optic cable is stimulating the receptors in sharks' mouths and luring them to perceive the cables as prey. Somewhat, our fiber optic cables are deeply confusing the sharks. I took this situation as a metaphor for human beings' mindless invasion of nature. While we are trying to connect with other human beings with our fiber optic cables, as usual, we are disconnecting from nature.
life-size shark skeletons are trapped in an ocean made of fiber optic threads. The group of fiber optic threads going through the sharks blink at a rate based on the speed of live sharks tracked with GPS data. The fiber optic threads composing this ocean blink based on the speed of the internet. We symbolize this with the number of tweets per second. The piece procedurally composes music made with trombone and choral voices generated by live data coming from the movement of live sharks and human use of the internet. We 3D scanned shark bone pieces at the Field Museum, 3D modeled and modified them to give their distorted posture. We 3D printed one shark and then I made silicone molds and resin casts. The fiber optic cables are illuminated by light engines and the custom written code collects live data and controls the blinking of the lights and the composition of music. The screaming sharks resemble us, individuals trying to survive in the age of corporations.
So, a couple more things I haven't mentioned in the video. You imagine I explained up much and there are still things. And this is the first sketch I drew before implementing this piece. And this is the shark we modeled and then 3D printed. It looks like realistic, but it has a very distorted form. And that's where media art and drawing gets together. So even if I make a media art, I think like a comics artist, there's that plasticity of the drawing to emphasize the pain that they are going through. If I would have known, I would have chosen another animal. Sharks are made of cartilage, so their bone doesn't stay. They disintegrate very quickly. Only thing that remains is their jaw or shriveled up pieces of here and there. So it was really hard to obtain a realistic looking shark skeleton. So we went to Field Museum and from the drawers they pulled out the parts for us. And we were able to scan them. Then at some point I made silicone molds like that. And I don't know anything about sculpture, so idea required that, and this is what it was. The second piece that we're going to look at is You Are the Ocean. Requires almost no explanation. It's more directly connected to what I was talking about. And in this piece, we used a brainwave sensor. So participant wears something that detects their relaxation and concentration level. We completed this piece a month ago. It's pretty recent. I'm purposefully showing the credits because it takes a group of people to do this. And that brings us to the graphic novel. Now we can talk about Not Here But Everywhere. Before we start talking about it, I mean, reading the chapter, I read, hopefully you enjoy, and I have to tell you the context because I'm going to read chapter 5. So this book has a unique aesthetic approach. This is not going to happen throughout the entire book, but I think 2 chapters are going to be narrated that way. So it tells the story of 2 different characters. And on the left side of the book, we hear the story of Helen. She's a 40-year-old arts professor from United States. She comes to Istanbul. And on the right side of the book, we read the story of Deniz. She's a 25-year-old biochemistry student who comes to Athens, Ohio, a small college town, to study. And there are a bunch of binaries in this story. At least it seems that way: woman and man, arts and science, Middle East and Midwest, dead and alive. And these binaries are there for deconstruction so that I can use humor as a tool and show these categories are meaningless. Both of the characters deal with a sense of grief. They lost someone important in their lives. Helen lost her child, and Deniz lost her sister, and they have to deal with that in a new cultural setting. And when we look at the title of the book, Not Here is obvious, right, related to grief, but Everywhere is a little bit about the traveling atoms that we talked about. And this has been mentioned in the Sufi mysticism, Big Bang theory, and theory of evolution. Helen's child appears in different forms, first as a fish, then as a seabird, and a raindrop, as a gecko, as a leaf, piece of air, so on. And not a binary, but both one side deals with trees, other side deals with animals. And then Helen and Deniz looks like separate stories until the end of the book. In the last chapter, we discover that they are parts of the same story world. And this is a little bit like the web that Haraway is talking about. Everything seems separate, but actually everything is connected in some way. One more thing, you're going to see when I read a character, neighbor, and I'm referring to previous chapter. In that chapter, she saved the life of a child. And we're coming back to... Thank you. Thank you. That clap means a lot to me. It took 4 months to make this, and it takes 8 minutes to read it. And if you would read it on your own, it would be 4 minutes. So, coming back to the slide, that graphic novels being a subset of media art for me, I want to talk a little bit of the materials that I used in my graphic novel practice. For example, this piece reminds me that I should have practiced monkey sounds better. And so how I made it is we had a hole in our apartment at home, and I want to fix everything myself. So I bought this thing from the hardware store, and it's an aluminum layer, and you fix it like this. If you don't know, it's very handy. And then it became the monkey cages. And this one is from my previous book, and the night sky here, it's impossible to guess how I made it. I use mustard, brown mustard. So I painted the paper with mustard, and then I just like inverted on Photoshop. It's like the negative of a photograph. And then that became the universe, the sky. And then this is made of chocolate paper, the headlights. In this book, I use cinnamon. And I painted with cinnamon, and this is how Helen sees Istanbul first time in the first chapter, because Istanbul is right now a giant construction site. They are making money by demolishing beautiful things and building ugly things instead of them. I collected leaves, and then they became the Helen's child. And of course, like when we do these things, there needs to be a bridge between material and the meaning, and they are not random like hopefully they are not random things. And for example, one thing I'm hoping to do is tear gas is an essential prop in this story because on Deniz's side, they are trying to improve the tear gas formula by making experiments on monkeys. And on the other side, tear gas will be used drastically in Istanbul. And this is an image from the Gezi protest, and that was the almost like the very well-known image. The Turkish police used the tear gas from a close distance and in this way. And that's like a street, Taksim, main street, and look at the number of the tear gas canisters during Gezi protests. And the thing is, this is again Taksim Square. And the thing is, they are supposed to fire it with 45-degree angle, but they aim it to people's head, using it like a weapon, using it like a bullet. And people here, these 7 people seems cheerful, but they are all dead. They were killed due to police brutality during Gezi protests. And while developed countries are creating their high-tech military technology, undeveloped countries or developing countries developing their own military technology. These are gas masks created during the Gezi protest. So the tear gas is an essential thing in this story. I hope to draw some of the pages by using actual tear gas. It's going to be like an orange ink. And so that's the connection between meaning and material. And that's my signal to wrap up this talk. So we're wrapping up. So that the book is about giving new meaning to permanent loss. And I want to bring this 13.7 billion years image back again, because in front of it, any kind of ambition, any kind of idea, any kind of happiness or any kind of sadness becomes meaningless. Keeping that in mind, I want to read you something very short in front of my mustard-made universe. Not here but everywhere will stand as a critique and celebration of two cultures, Midwestern and Middle Eastern, while story characters try to give meaning to their permanent loss. An individual's boundary goes beyond her skin, her beginning goes beyond her birth, her end expands into others' memories. The narration will explore the blurry area between binaries, West and East, male and female, art and science, dead and alive, forgetting and remembering, justice and injustice. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. Yes, Thomas.
Hi, do you, that was fantastic, first of all.
Thank you.
I love that. And I just wondered about your practice. Do you write the narrative like in words first and then you illustrate it, or do you do it all at the same time?
Right. Here's a question from a writer. Thomas is a writer, one of our fellows here, right? And so I write with quick drawn images, and it's total mess when I created it. And if I don't open it up, I'll forget what it is. So it's just mix of really half sentences and some like round-headed people and so. And then it just develops from there. So I think mainly with images, but little bit of words. Yeah. Yes. Jackie. Yes.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Did you develop these stories together in parallel or separately?
That is a really good question. So I think ideally when you are gonna tell a story like that, the best way of building is like this, right? But what I did was I developed Helen's side, and then I started creating Deniz's side, which was difficult, so that I never was able to create something that is equal to Helen's side. So that there are good parts, but it's smaller. So that now it's going to be mainly Helen's story, but there will be some parts that Deniz's life coming in. So that's my first experiment, so I was allowed to make a mistake. Michael, yes.
Özge, there's a famous line about the two directions in musical theater, where one direction is that after using a lot of words, you need more meaning, so you start to sing. And in the other direction, which is another style, you sing, but when it gets to be too important, you speak. The opposite directions. And I'm wondering if in any way how this applies to the relation between words and image. In other words, when you mix them, is it because in one direction the words require the image, and in the other direction, for whatever reason, the image requires the word? How does the dynamic work between the two genres?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really seeing the images and then using the words. But one principle that I use is not to repeat what we are seeing in the image, right? And that requires a lot of cleaning. Even like before the image is laid out there with full color, I may be still repeating the same information in the text so that I clean it up. And text is so powerful because you can cover a lot of ground with text very quickly, but when I try to do it with images, it takes like years to illustrate what I'm talking about. Steiner or Tatiana, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how did you manage to bring together the universe of media art and the one of graphic novels? Because they are often two different universes that not speak so much with each other.
Right.
So I wonder, how did it start? Were you already drawing before secretly, and then you decide to bring it into light?
Right.
Because, I mean, I'm also actually secretly drawing, but it's something that I still didn't bring into light.
Right.
And I work with media art, but somehow for me has always been two different universes that yet I've not been able to somehow make coexist, also because I consider drawing really intimate, and somehow I feel difficulty of connecting these two worlds.
Yeah. So that I discovered planning in life doesn't do anything. Life does it the way it does, right? So I think it just came together because of the flow of my life. Like my undergrad was in mathematics. So, and then I studied film. I was drawing for a humor magazine. So, and then I came to the States, went to a relevant school, and then went to Georgia Tech, did a PhD there on digital media. But I was drawing whole time. So, and then my PhD thesis was a piece that thinks comics as a digital performance piece, that people see themselves as a comics drawings on the wall. And it told the story of a human egg, and anyone was able to take the position of a human egg, and the sperms attack the egg, and you can kick and just punch them, and like it was a story like that. So it was really, that was the point when comics and digital media really intersected fully, and then they just sometimes go tangentially, sometimes overlap, sometimes one swallows the other, but that was just the flow of life for me. There and there, yes.
I wanted to ask about your ocean installation with the brain waves.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make that with any? I mean, I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. I wondered if you made it for any specific occasion or event, or with anything in mind, or what you will be doing with it, if you have any plans for it.
Yeah, that's something important. That you were asking if I had a venue to exhibit those pieces. Yeah. I first, the Fiberoptic Ocean one, at that point, I wanted to build something big, and I wanted to play with like the water, something like that. And it was a test for me. I wanted to show it myself that I can do something like that. And it was kind of a mistake. You won't do something that big before getting a commission. So I learned that in a painful way. Yeah. It's a very difficult piece to exhibit because it takes a long time to set it up. And whenever someone offers something like that, I find excuses for not to exhibit it because I don't want to reinstall it. But eventually, I should exhibit it. I hope I will exhibit it one day. I want to exhibit it. And the other one is we just completed a month ago, and I am hoping you would go to media art festivals, the usual ones that I attend in general. But if you know any venues, I'm happy to.
In a science
Right.
museum or something, or some museum of the brain or something like that.
Exactly.
It's something that a lot of people would enjoy.
Right.
It's interactive. People would enjoy using it.
Right. I need a publicist or someone who helps me. Yeah. Yes, Steiner had a question.
I can help you with the gallery thing.
Please
if you want,
do, yeah.
So there's a interesting part of it that you talked about at the beginning is making a less human-centric, idea of the planet, and
the humans are right at the center.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No. Well, I was going to say. Well, for instance, the shark incident, which I also know about. I'm glad I didn't realize that it was connected to that. So there's different ideas about why the sharks behave this way. Some of them are that they have their own free will to try to destroy it. I mean that there's actually intelligence behind their feelings about it, or what we would call intelligence. Sentience. So. So I'm interested in how you planned, or if you plan to work in this idea, like a human-centric condition of violence, like the tear gas becomes a very central part, and then is there other ways that you're thinking about making it less human-centric or less human supremacist in other ways?
It's really good. So that this theory thinking, it's a little bit like that word image thing. In media art, you have a theoretical concept and you execute it. It's like word image duality. It doesn't happen exactly that I start from a certain concept and execute it, like not direct way. So I have a vague idea and I execute something and then I look at it and I think, oh, that's what I'm trying to do. And I look at it, I wish I would have done it this way. And then you have to do a second iteration of it. So that, this not placing the humans at the center so much is a new idea that are coming after building it, even especially you are the ocean piece. And it's something that's bothering me, and maybe humans may disappear in the future work, yeah. There is one hand at the back from Julian. I'm like a good teacher knowing everybody's name. Yeah.
You're a really good teacher. One of the things that I love about yours is the visuals are so powerful, right? Especially in the graphic novel, in the images where she's drowning or sort of it's just so gripping. But something that I was thinking about was the shark piece and your use of sound in that one. And it made me wonder, are there moments when the visual can't work for you? Like, is there an emotion, is there some circumstance where you can't represent it visually? Or have you found yourself in a situation like that?
I'm sure there are those moments, like in film, one of the most powerful costumes is nudity, right? Absence of the costume. And one of the most powerful sound effects is silence. So that in Persepolis, she uses a black frame when she experiences a huge horror. I think in those moments, the images are not capable of telling it. And then absence sometimes tells the best. But then it's just I'm a visual thinker. I'm sure there are things that sounds would narrate it better or words would narrate it better. Yeah. Very vague answer I gave you. Yeah. Okay, now I think we can go have wine, and we're gonna bring some rakı later on, right? So yeah, the thing that's shown. Yeah. All right.